Find a photograph of yourself as a child. You don't need to have it in front of you. Just call it up in your mind. 6 years old. Maybe younger. Look at the face. Now hold this alongside it. Not a single cell in that body is still in yours. Every atom has been replaced many times over. The brain that held that child's thoughts has been entirely rewired. The opinions, the fears, the words you knew, almost none of them are still in you. By any physical measure, by any psychological measure. The child in that photograph is a different person from the one watching this now. And yet you would say, without hesitation, that it was you. That something has carried through. Every major tradition on earth has tried to name that something. None of them agree on what it is. The question of what makes you you, what survives the changing body, what carries through time, what continues after death if anything does, has had 4 major answers in human history. 3 of them come from religious traditions that span over 5,000 years and roughly 3 billion living people. The 4th is a scientific account, only about 100 years old, that disagrees with all 3 of the others. We're going to take each of them seriously. Start with Islam. In Islam, the answer is the ruh, Arabic for spirit or soul. The Quran is unusually direct about it in chapter 17, verse 85. They ask you about the ruh, the verse says. Say it is from the affair of my Lord, and you have not been given of knowledge except a little. The soul is from God's command. Breathed into each human being. It is not a substance the body produces. It is not generated by the brain. It enters the body, according to a famous hadith recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, at 120 days of fetal development, and it leaves at death. While it lives in the body, the ruh is paired with the nafs, the lower self, the part that holds desires and impulses and reactions. The lifelong struggle between the two is most of what Islamic spiritual life is about. At death, the angel of death separates the ruh from the body, and the soul enters a waiting state called barzakh, where it remains until the day of resurrection. Notice what this account assumes. The soul is real, it's distinct from the body, it's individual, it survives death, and it is also, by the Quran's own statement, mostly unknowable. Whatever the ruh is, human beings were not given the equipment to fully understand it. Then there's Hinduism, which makes a much stranger claim. There is a soul, it is called the atman. But the atman is not what you would normally call your soul. It is not your personality. It is not your memories. It is not the voice in your head. The atman is what is left when you strip all of that away. The silent witness behind every experience. The awareness that knows the personality and the memories and the voice without being any of them. And here Hinduism becomes radical. The atman, according to the Upanishads, text composed in northern India somewhere between 800 and 200 BCE, is identical to Brahman. Brahman is the ultimate reality, the ground of everything, the single underlying truth from which the entire universe emerges. The most famous formula from the Chandogya Upanishad is just 3 Sanskrit words. Tvam asi. That thou art. The deepest part of you is not separate from the ultimate. It is the ultimate. It is wearing your face for a while, and it has forgotten that it is doing so. When you die, the Atman doesn't go to heaven. It doesn't dissolve. It moves into another body shaped by karma and lives another life, then another, until eventually, perhaps after thousands of lifetimes, it recognizes what it always was and stops. That recognition is moksha. Liberation. The Bhagavad Gita, composed sometime between the 5th and 2nd century BCE, puts it this way: as a person discards worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, the embodied self casts off worn-out bodies and takes on new ones. So in Islam, the soul is real, individual, and breathed in by God. In Hinduism, the soul is real, but it is not individual. It is God, mistaking itself for an individual. And then comes Buddhism, which says no. There is no soul. There is no atman. The Buddha called this anattā, no self, and made it one of the 3 marks of existence, alongside impermanence and suffering. What you take to be a self is, according to early Buddhist analysis, a constantly shifting collection of 5 aggregates: physical form, sensation, perception; mental formations, consciousness itself. None of them is permanent. None of them is independent. None of them, on examination, is you. But this raises an obvious question. If there is no soul, what gets reborn? What carries the consequences of one life into the next? The Buddha was asked this directly, many times, and refused to answer. He classified questions like this as undeclared, questions that did not help with the problem of suffering, and so were not worth resolving. But his successors had to address it. There is a wonderful exchange in a text called the Questions of King Milinda, written around the 1st or 2nd century BCE in what is now Pakistan. The king asked the monk Nagasena, "If there is no soul, how does rebirth work?" Nagasena answers with an image. Imagine a candle being lit from another candle just before the first one goes out. Is the new flame the same as the old flame? No. Is it a different flame? Also no. There is causal continuity without a thing being passed across. That, Nagasena says, is all there is. In Buddhism, the soul question doesn't get answered, it dissolves. There is no soul, but there is also nothing simply ending. Something flows, just not a someone. Which brings us to the fourth voice. Modern science, when it speaks about the soul at all, generally says one thing. There isn't one. Not because anyone has proved it, but because every function the soul was historically supposed to perform, thinking, feeling, willing, remembering, being a self, has one by one been traced to specific structures and processes inside the brain. In the 1950s, a Canadian neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield, working at the Montreal Neurological Institute, performed a series of operations on patients who were awake. He stimulated different points on the surface of their brains with a small electrical probe. He could trigger specific memories, specific sensations, specific movements of specific limbs. The patients reported the experiences as if they were happening, even though Penfield had simply touched their cortex with a wire. Penfield himself, by the end of his career, came to a strange conclusion. He had spent decades mapping the brain, and he wrote near the end of his life that he could not fully explain the mind by what he had found inside the skull. The deciding self, the one watching the experiment happen, did not show up on his electrical map. He died unsure whether the soul existed and unable to dismiss the idea. That tension is roughly where mainstream neuroscience still sits today. Most researchers will tell you that the self is what the brain does, a process, a model, an ongoing simulation, not a thing. The Portuguese-American neuroscientist Antonio Damasio has spent a career making exactly this argument. The self, on this view, is something the brain constructs moment by moment to organize experience. When the brain stops, the self stops. There is nothing to leave the body because there was never anything separable in the first place. But there is a remainder, the same remainder Penfield noticed. The simple fact that there is something it is like to be you, right now, watching this, that any of this is being experienced at all, has no widely accepted scientific explanation. Science can describe everything the brain does. It cannot yet say why doing those things produces an inside. The soul question, in its sharpest form, has not been answered. It has only been set aside. If you've made it this far, these are the questions this channel keeps returning to. Hit subscribe, a lot more coming. Now look at the four answers next to each other. Islam. A real individual soul, breathed in by God, surviving death, mostly unknowable. Hinduism. A real soul, which turns out to be the ultimate reality wearing your face, recycling through bodies until it remembers what it is. Buddhism. No soul at all, but causal continuity that doesn't require one. Science. No soul, no continuity, and an unresolved question about why there is any inside to you in the first place. You cannot believe all four. They contradict each other in their basic structure. If the atman is Brahman, the Islamic account is wrong about the soul being individual. If the Buddha is right that there is no self, both Islam and Hinduism are wrong about what survives. If the neuroscientists are right, all three traditions are pointing at something that does not exist. But notice something else. All four are answers to the same question. The question is real. Every human being sooner or later asks some version of it. The traditions disagree about the answer. They do not disagree that it's worth asking. And they do not disagree about what is at stake. What you think the soul is, or whether you think you have one, will shape how you live, how you treat other people, how you face your own death, and what you think death actually means. The honest position is probably this. Nobody currently knows. Not the neuroscientist, not the imam, not the Vedic philosopher, not the Buddhist monk. They each have a coherent picture. None of them can prove it. Each of them dismisses the other's pictures, sometimes politely, sometimes not. And each of them is responding to the same stubborn fact that something is happening in here right now that the bare physics of carbon and water and electricity does not, on the face of it, fully explain. You are going to land somewhere on this question whether you decide to or not. The default in most of the modern world is the scientific answer, and it might well be right. But it is worth noticing that it is the youngest of the four, the most contested even within its own field, and the one with the largest unanswered question still sitting at the very center of it. So, which of the four feels most true to you when you actually look hard at your own life? And is that the same answer you were raised with? Or a different one? Leave a comment. The conversation is the point.